Hey there, and welcome to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Every week, we chat through different business building topics that will help you gain clarity around your goals, find inspiration in your journey, and also help you create a life and a business that you love. My name is Krista, and I'm a wedding and brand photographer and your go-to no-fluff business coach. In these episodes, we talk through both the tactical strategies, habits, and the mindset work that will help you take those really big leaps. And we always focus on the real talk and the behind the scenes of what it takes to create a sustainable and a thriving business. Because let's be honest, the work isn't always glamorous, but it's always worth it. So girlfriend, let's make some moves and start calling our own shots. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the She Calls Her Shots podcast. I don't know about you, but it has been chilly in Northern California. And so I am sitting here. I have my tea in my Harry Potter mug, my favorite coffee mug. You might see me with it for my one-on-one clients when we join one-on-one calls. They often find me drinking from it. It's my favorite mug to drink from. But wherever you're listening from, just thank you so much for being here today. I hope that you also have a warm cup of coffee or tea or a sparkling water or a glass of wine or whatever you need today. But thank you so much for being here. And I am really pumped about this topic because this is something that this time of year especially, I feel like is so relevant and important to think about and remember as we're thinking about the new year and our goals and the change that we want to see in our lives. But truthfully, this is a topic that I feel like comes up a lot in my one-on-one calls with clients because we all want to create better habits, right? At some point, there's likely something in your life that you want to be better at or want to do more frequently or just want to improve at. And so this topic is so important and so relevant. And I wanted to share it because it's actually pretty relevant for me in my journey right now. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that I love to keep this podcast kind of live in real time, right? Like I don't ever want this to be a podcast where you tune in and it's like me being the expert telling you exactly what you need to do and exactly, the perfect way of doing things because I have all of this expertise. Like that is just not my vibe. Like that's just not how I roll. And so this has been really relevant in my life lately. And I want to be able to kind of explore this journey with you because if I had to guess, I would imagine that you are probably also going through something similar or have experienced some similar feelings lately. And so I'm really excited to dive into this episode today. And if this is your first time listening in, thank you so much for being here. I am so thrilled. The podcast has had an amazing year as we're wrapping up, as I'm releasing this episode and we're wrapping up 2022. I recently pulled my Spotify Wrapped for podcasts. I didn't even know they had that. I've been loving my personal Spotify Wrapped things. Like raise your hand if you look forward to that every year. I don't know why, but it's like something I love that that's a feature that they added because it's so fun to see what songs I've listened to and kind of what my music journey has looked like this year. So I always look forward to that part of it, but I didn't even realize that they have it for podcasters. And so I looked at my stats for the podcast, and I have stats on my podcasting hosting site. So I'm regularly checking those, but it was really incredible to see the amount of reach that the podcast has had over the last year, the growth that I've seen and the amount of listeners, each and every single one of you tuning in and listening in from all around the world. I just hope that you know, I don't take that for granted. Like I am so truly honored and thankful that you are here today. So if you're listening in, thank you so much for being here. If you've been a long-term listener, I'm just so glad you're back and I'm so glad to continue this conversation with you today. And let's go ahead and dive in, right? So we want to change a habit. We want to improve something, start something new, do something better, or just like make a change in our life. And I want to start with one thing that I think is the most important. And then I'll be honest with you, I have a couple more tips. It's not just one. So we're going to dive into a couple of tips. But the one I want to start with is I think the one that's going to be like the most important to think about and to start with first. And that is how to change who you identify as when you want to start a new habit. And what I mean by that is that we create these stories as we grow in our life, as we go through these different seasons, as we experience different things and, just learn and evolve, we start to tell ourselves these stories, right? What we're capable of, or what we're allowed to do, or what we should do, or what a, quote unquote, a good person does. Like we start to tell our stories of these things of how we identify as a person, right? And sometimes over time, whether it's by our own means or by someone else giving us, like telling us who we are or how we should be, we sometimes start to develop these stories that aren't true, but that we've told ourselves so many times over and over again that we start to believe that they're true, right? So as a personal example, I, for a very long time, just believed that I was incapable of eating healthy. Like that was just like, listen, I love mac and cheese. I love pasta and pizza and bread and carbs and mashed potatoes. And literally, you could think of all of the comfort foods. And I love them, right? Like they're just, especially this time of year, you just want like a big bowl of mac and cheese or a big bowl of mashed potatoes, right? And so I started to develop this story about myself that it's, impossible for me to eat healthy. And so what did that mean? Well, that meant that whenever I was hungry, I would automatically reach for those comfort foods, right? Like a big bowl of mac and cheese or order in a pizza. Like I still have. I have the Domino's and the Pizza Hut app on my phone. I'm going to be honest with you. Like that's still there, right? But I learned, over time that was just a story that I was telling myself. And the more that I told myself that story, the more that I leaned into that and believed that to be true. And so the more I leaned into those habits and continued to do those habits. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I started to realize that the way that I identify and the way that I tell myself, the person that I am makes a really big difference. And so when I change that narrative to, I want to identify as someone who, yes, loves mac and cheese and loves to indulge every once in a while, but also loves to eat food that just fuels my body, right? Because we all know that feeling. And this isn't a nutrition, don't worry, like this isn't going to be a nutrition episode. Like I'm not going into like healthy eating. Listen, it's like it's the holiday season. Like I think you need to eat the things that feel really good for you, right? Whatever that looks like. But just to kind of elaborate on this example a little bit is that I realized that, whenever I was eating healthy foods, eating clean meals, right? Like chicken, vegetables, and whatever, like clean things, my body did feel really good. And I started to realize, why would I want to identify as someone who ignores that? Like, I want my body to feel good. I want to feel good about going through my day and not feeling lethargic or tired or like getting that 3 p.m. like, oh, I need to take a nap, right? Like, I started to realize that the way that I talked about myself and who I identified as make a really big difference. And so that's one example of something that I had realized in my life, but this is pertinent no matter what habit it is that you're trying to change, right? If you are trying to, maybe you've told yourself the story that you are not a morning person. And so you have believed this story. I mean, I am raising my hand because I think that there was a period in my life where I identified as that. And let me tell you, the amount of times that I ended up sleeping in because I believed that story, right? And I was robbing myself of being able to start my day early because I just continued to tell myself like, oh no, mornings, like that's not my thing. And this was something I actually changed quite a while ago. I actually love waking up really early. Not going to say that I do it every day or all the time, because again, we go through seasons and some seasons I just love to sleep in, but I no longer tell myself the story that that's who I am. I just honor that in this season, I might need to sleep a little bit extra. I actually just recovered from a pretty like bad cold. And so in that season, in that week, I needed a lot of rest. And I didn't tell myself the story that, oh, I just am someone who's lazy and sleeps all the time. I just recognized that, you know what, this week, this season, my body needs this. But I eliminated the story that I was telling myself. And so the first question I have for you, if you're wanting to change a habit, if you're wanting to develop or start something new or stop doing something, my first question is, what story are you telling yourself that has to do with that habit? Are you, without even realizing it, feeding in to believing that you are the type of person who does this no matter what, or doesn't do this no matter what. And ask yourself and get really honest. Am I telling myself a story that's holding me back from being able to even think about starting or doing or adopting this habit? And so first step is really just change how you identify. Remove yourself from that story, give yourself some distance from that story, and create a new story, right? Like if you want to be someone who wakes up early, start to identify as someone who does that, and then figure out not only how you can identify differently, right? Because sometimes that's just like telling yourself, like, I am a morning person. And our brains are smart enough to be like, well, you're telling yourself that, but over the last 12 years, you've slept till 10 a.m., right? Like, so that's not enough to make the change entirely, but I think it's the first step, right? We have to be able to even believe that we're capable of identifying as the person who does that, and then start to think about, well, if I was a morning person, what are some things that I would do, right? Like, how would I show up? If I am a morning person, like, why am I going to get out of bed at 7 when I could sleep in and be comfortable and keep to my old routine? So the next thing is really starting to figure out, like, what does that shift mean? Like, what is it going to bring or add to your life? But there's a big but here. It's so important to figure out what that means, right? So let's say, I'll get to the but in a second. Let's say that you want to be a morning person and you want to wake up early. You want to wake up at 7 o'clock every day, and you want to get up, pour yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, meditate, do your planning for the day, get in a workout, like a whole slew list of things. Maybe read like a bit of a personal development or like a growth book. Like you have this big list of things that you want to do. The number one pitfall that I see when I talk about habits with clients or anything like that is that there's this, we all do this, right? We're all go-getters. We want to make big changes. And so we end up trying to make all of these changes at the same time. And I laugh because I know you can relate to this. How many times have you set a goal to do something different? And it's not just like one goal to do something different. It's like 8 goals. Like all of a sudden overnight, we like not only believe we're going to be a morning person, but we're going to be a morning person who meditates regularly, who like reads every day, who works out every day. Like all of a sudden we expect to be a completely different person in this overnight shift. And so the big but here is that figure out what that version of you would do, right? Like why is it important to wake up early? Start to make that list. And then cross off everything from that list except for the next first step. So if you want to be a morning person, maybe that for you means waking up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Great. Make that your goal. And remove everything else. Like let yourself wake up at that time and, maybe you need, well, we'll get to that in a second, like a motivator to actually get out of bed. But maybe you'll naturally start to do some of those things, but don't make it a requirement. If we're all of a sudden putting all of these expectations on what all of this needs to include, I need to wake up at 7 and do this like laundry list of things before 9 a.m., all of a sudden, it's not sustainable and we're going to get frustrated. We're just going to likely get so frustrated that we go back to our old ways and we further develop that story that we aren't good at doing something, right? So first step, change who you identify as. Next step, figure out what that means for you, what that looks like, and start with the smallest step. If that just means waking up early at a designated time, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, do that. And then let yourself just take on the day and do the things that you want to do. And then after that's become a habit, however long that takes you, you might have heard that it takes 3 weeks to develop a habit. That's not really true. It really depends on the habit because some habits are going to be harder to form than others. So don't put this like unrealistic time on yourself of when you need to like be an expert at this, but give yourself a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever feels right and natural for you. Give yourself that time and space to just adopt that first habit. And then when it feels good, add on the next one. If you're getting comfortable with, okay, I can wake up early. I can do this. Like I filled my mornings with things that I love doing. And now I actually enjoy getting up early. Then you can start to add in, okay, now I want to also work out every day. So now I'm going to wake up do a little bit of my fun, happy morning routine, and then add in a workout, right? Like build it slowly as you go. And then the third thing, which this has actually been a really new thing for me, I had kind of done these first two steps like pretty regularly, I would say, over the years. This third thing is something that is a little bit newer for me, and it was kind of an aha moment when I started doing it, which is why I'm really excited to share it with you, is to create a sensory motivator. And so again, I will use another example of there was a time in my life a couple of years ago where I was really interested in like getting fit and getting healthy. It was actually the beginning of COVID. Like a week before COVID hit, I kind of had this like, I want to get healthy. I want to, be healthier. And then lockdown happened. But somehow, I think it was because I was relieved of all of my other life, stresses or like all of my other obligations. Like I couldn't do any photography, right? No one was leaving their house. And so oddly enough, I actually was very healthy and fit, doing at-home workouts for like most of 2020, which is really interesting, but I digress. So a couple of years ago, I wanted to get healthy. That was my goal. And what I was doing is I was using other people's photos as my motivation. And there's a couple of things with this, not to say that that's a bad thing to do, because at the time I had very limited photos of myself where I really felt healthy and fit. I had a couple of years prior, and by a couple of years, I don't mean I was consistent for a couple of years, but like a couple of years before 2020, I had a stint of like 6 months that I felt really healthy and fit and in shape. So I had some photos that I could look at, but I kept relying on other people's pictures and other people's journey as my inspiration. And looking back on it now and like having tried to do that in other various forms in my life, I realized it's not really healthy or beneficial to do that, because what we're doing, it's just another form of comparison. We're just like putting a label on it as if it's motivation. But what ends up happening, right? You're not seeing results as fast as you want. You don't feel the way that you want to feel. You don't look the way that you want to feel. And then you start looking at other people, seeing how they're consistent, seeing their journey, seeing what they're doing. And then all of a sudden, all of that self-doubt creeps in, right? You should be doing this. Why aren't you further along? Blah, blah, blah. It's just not healthy, right? And so I realized that during that time throughout my journey. So I stopped doing that. Like whenever I would set a goal, I would stop really trying to look at other people and try and find the internal motivation as to why I wanted to do it. But it wasn't until recently that I discovered there's a really powerful thing that you can add on to that. And that's this creating a sensory motivator. So for me, for example, one of the things that I felt lately is that over the last year and a half, 2 years, I am so comfortable working from home, and I am very productive no matter whether I show up in my office at home in my PJs or whether I like actually put clothes on and get dressed, right? Like I can be very productive even in comfortable clothes. But the difference is that I realized there were some days where it actually feels good and feels fulfilling to dress up. Even though I had nowhere to go, even if I didn't have any one-on-one calls, even if I had no reason to be on video that day, I realized, you know what, actually there are some days where I just want to look nice, like, because it makes me feel good. It fulfills me and like adds joy to my life. But I didn't want to put the pressure of feeling like I have to show up like that every day, because I've done that and it didn't work. Again, like just was not leaning into the things that filled me up and was putting these expectations of like who I needed to be and how I needed to show up. And obviously in most cases that doesn't end well. So I realized lately, you know what? Okay, I don't want to make it this blanket statement of every day I need to show up, have lipstick, do my hair and makeup, put on clothes, right? That's not my goal. But my goal instead is some days when I want to show up like that, I want to have something in place to make me feel motivated and excited, right? And so a similar example of kind of how I've used this, going back to fitness is I have been really wanting to lean back into working out. And because I find so much joy. I love starting my day, getting in a quick 30-minute workout. It just makes me feel so much better. But I didn't want to compare myself to other people. I didn't want to use other people as my journey and as my motivation. And so instead, what I did is I created a folder in my iPhone and I called it My Best Self. And My Best Self has a multitude of pictures. Some of it is fitness related. Some of it is like actual pictures that I took after doing a workout or like of my, Apple Fitness, like the move goal or whatever, or the steps. But then some of it is just times in my life when I did feel really healthy and strong, just like pictures of me doing life, right? So for example, there are pictures of when I traveled on my sabbatical, when I worked full time a few years ago, many years ago now. I got to take a sabbatical. And so I felt really fit. I felt really healthy. I just felt like my best self. That's the best way to describe it. And so there's these pictures of me out and living life and just happy and joyful and just feeling so happy with myself, happy in my skin, and just like proud of the progress that I had done. And so those pictures are in there too. And so whenever I wake up in the morning, I know that I have that folder. I can pull up those pictures. I can scroll through them. And it brings me so much joy and excitement to be like, this is the person that I want to be. This is who I want to show up as. Not because of some number on the scale or like, however weight I want to get to. Not because of any of that, but because I want to radiate the energy that I radiated in these photos. And to take it one step further, I also have gotten into the habit of I keep my my headphones right by my bedside table. And every morning over the last week, I have this one song that pumps me up. It's like, this has been the same song for probably the last 8 years. And it's by Gym Class Heroes, which if you've never heard of them, they were one of my high school bands that I loved. And it's called The Fighter. And it's just, if you've not heard it, it's just one of those songs that you listen to and it motivates you to be amazing, right? To show up, to do really great things. And so in the morning now, when my alarm goes off, I was getting in the habit of just hitting snooze, and sleeping in. Now my alarm goes off. I put my headphone in. I start playing that song. I start listening to that song. And then I start scrolling through the pictures of my best self and who I want to be and how I want to show up as. And that has made it so much easier to get out of bed and to start showing up as a person that I want to show up as. Not because of some number goal, not because of some metric or, not because of some glamour stat that I want to live up to, but because I want to be that person who was just radiating with self-love and just felt so confident and so good in who they were. And so those are my 3 tips. If you're looking to change a habit, I really would love for you to first start with changing who you identify as. Is there a story that you need to detach yourself from? And then next, figure out what is the smallest first step. Is it just waking up early? Is it just setting reminders throughout the day to remind you to do something? Is it stocking your fridge with clean, healthy foods? Is it, what is that for you? What's that first easiest step? Hey there, just interrupting briefly to mention that if you're really enjoying this episode, you'll probably also love being on my email list. Each week, I send out tips and resources and inspiration to make building your business feel more fun. We dive deeper into the podcast episodes, we share relatable and sometimes embarrassing stories about the real life behind the scenes of being a business owner. And I love to share tips and resources to help make the journey feel a little easier and a little bit more enjoyable. So head on over to KristaMarieLynch.com and enter in your info to join. And then lastly, creating that sensory motivator, getting those photos, getting those songs, doing the things and adding those things into your life that'll help you show up as that person. And so I hope that this was so helpful for you today. The last thing I wanted to share, unrelated but related, is that I'm so excited to announce that I have coaching spots opening up in January. And so if you've been listening in, if you're you know what, I feel like it's the new year, it's time where I really want to go all in and invest in a coach. I'm really excited to share that not only will I have one-on-one coaching spots, I actually have this really incredible group coaching program that will be launching in early 2023. I already have 3 amazing women that are going to be joining. And if this is something you're interested in, I haven't shared it publicly. There's nothing online yet, but I am talking about it with people who are interested. So if that's something that you would like to explore or look into, if you go to KristaMarieLynch.com/coaching, there you can find some information on coaching, and there will be a link in there to schedule a call with me. And we can schedule a discovery call, see if it would be a good fit, figure out which would be the best fit for where you are in your business. And I'm just so excited. This new service and this new coaching opportunity feels so aligned, and I am just like bubbling over with excitement for it. So I would love to chat about that with you if that's something you're interested in. And if this episode was helpful, if you listened in and you were like, oh my gosh, this was the motivation and the pump up talk that I needed, I would love for you to share this episode with a friend. Sometimes we all just need this gentle reminder that those really big changes that we want to make are totally possible. They just take time. And so you can either share this directly with someone, or you could share it on Instagram and tag me at krista.marie.photography. And I'd love to reshare and shout you out. And just thank you so much for being here. I'm honored you would take this time to listen in. And I am excited to see you over in the next episode. One last thing before you go. I'd absolutely love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you've already left a review, I'd love for you to share this episode with your business bestie. I love getting to shout out my listeners on the show, and the more listeners that we have, the more that I can help others create a thriving and sustainable business too. Thank you so much again for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to hear your takeaways from today's episode.